Alice in Wonderland, or Alice, really is two books: Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. But they're referred to usually as if they were one book. This is not exactly true in one sense. The first book was published in 1865, the second book in 1872. They can be read as if they were separate books, and it's clear from examining Lewis Carroll's diaries that he did not intend to write a second book when he wrote the 1865 volume. Nonetheless, these days most people read the two together, and I'd like to treat the two together because they are worth seeing. They collectively, Alice is a masterpiece of literature. It's also the book that most people think of as initiating the publishing category of children's literature, not other kinds of publishing for children, like moral tales of instruction or books teaching you how to read, but children's literature. And Alice is real literature. You can read it in any text you want, of course, but I would like to make a couple of recommendations. Nowadays, when children's authors submit a manuscript, typically the publisher arranges to have an illustrator, and each of them is hired separately. But in Lewis Carroll's case, he was, in addition to being a professor, an entrepreneur, and he engaged Sir John Tenniel to make the illustrations that go with the book. They worked closely together, and in a sense, Lewis Carroll was the boss. So, although there are many good illustrated versions of Alice, I recommend that you get the one with Sir John Tenniel's illustrations. There are many of those as well, that is, many of those editions, but one particular edition put out by Martin Gardner is called the Annotated Alice. And that volume has just a wealth of extra information in the margins. So if you think you'd like to really get to know Alice well, look for one of the Martin Gardner editions. While you're reading Alice, I ask you to think of whether or not this reading is the same or different from the reading you had as a child if you read it when you were young. Regardless of whether or not you read it when you were young, I'd like you to think as you read this book now, is this book really for children, or is it really for adults? Are there different ways to read this book? Finally, Lewis Carroll loved puzzles, and I'd like to give you one of his puzzles that I found in one of his books on mathematical entertainments. It's not in Alice, but I think it's worth looking at. I think of it as the 24-pig puzzle. The idea of the 24-pig puzzle is that one has a corral with 4 sub-corrals within it. A, B, C, D. Think of them as just going around. There are 24 pigs, and the puzzle is to distribute the pigs so that as you go from one corral to the next, each with some of the pigs, you're always going to a number of pigs that's nearer 10. Okay? That's what Lewis Carroll asks you to do. Distribute the pigs so that as you go from one corral to the next, you're always going nearer 10. This is a lot harder than it may seem at first, because Lewis Carroll does not mean you to go around the circle once. He says, always nearer 10. That's the problem that he left us with, and for right now, that's the problem I'll leave you with.